The keys lay on the table. The metallic rings still echoed in my ears, even though I had set them down hours ago. The house felt empty, as if the walls were hearing silence for the first time in years. 14 years ago, I bought this house not for myself. Back then, I thought of Teresa, the woman who would later call me a cage. I thought of the future we were building together. I worked long hours at the insurance office, stayed late so she could have everything. But it turned out to mean nothing. Teresa was always searching for herself, fitness clubs, seminars, girlfriends with endless talk about freedom. I found myself elsewhere, underwater, with a spear gun in my hands and air hissing through a snorkel. Spearfishing always gave me peace. Down there, in the dark, everything was more honest than it was on land. That evening she said, "You're keeping me from living the way I want." I replied, "Fine. Freedom it is." The next day I left. No shouting, no fight. I simply placed the keys and the papers back where they belong. Every car, the house, the accounts, they were all in my name. She never noticed it once in 14 years. Now Teresa had freedom. Real freedom. Freedom without a roof, without a car, without money. I shut the door, walked to the parking lot, and sat in my own car. But before turning the key, my eyes caught on the sedan beside me. Her phone was lying on the seat. The screen lit up. One unread message. The name at the top was all too clear. Greg. A man I had worked beside for 5 years. At that moment I realized, it wasn't about her dreams. Teresa already had another kind of freedom. And that freedom had a name. The house smelled of fresh coffee. Not mine. Expensive beans ground by a silver machine that never belonged to me. My mornings were different. A paper cup from 7-Eleven. Burnt taste, thin lid, sticky rim. That was enough. Her sound came next. The sharp metallic jingle of keys. Not random keys. The new Maybach keys. She spun them around her finger, the teeth clicking against each other like small knives. She said, "Listen to this sound. That's success." The words hung in the air. A draft from the half-open window hit my neck. Cold morning air slid down my collar. My chair creaked when I leaned back. No one looked at me. 3 days from now they would regret this. She smiled and placed the keys on the counter, right in front of the family. Helen adjusted a vase, shifting it half an inch, as if balance mattered only to flowers. Robert rubbed his palm once and folded the newspaper. They all stared at the keys. Not at me. The clink was louder than any sentence. A cousin whispered. He said, "Mark will never touch those keys." Someone laughed quietly. The laugh cut sharper than glass. I stared at the coffee cup in my hand. Thin paper, greasy logo smeared by my thumb. Their mugs were porcelain, white and polished. Emma's nails tapped her cup like a drummer testing rhythm. Every detail rehearsed. The smell of bacon drifted in from the kitchen. My plate was bare. Cold fork rested beside it, untouched. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. And you, just memories." My name. Spoken for the first time. Sharp as broken glass. "Mark." I lifted the cup. The paper edge scratched my lip. Bitter liquid burned my tongue. It didn't matter. I preferred the burn. Only 12 hours remained. The clock ticked louder than the chatter. Every second counted down. Robert finally spoke, voice dry as dust. He said, "Stand closer, Mark." I moved, slow steps across the tile. Shoes stiff, heels dragging. Draft followed me, colder with every step. Emma snapped a photo with her phone. The click was final, merciless. I was in the frame. But not in their eyes. The maid entered, carrying a plate of eggs. She set it down, glanced at me, then at the empty space where my plate should have been. Her lips pressed tight. She noticed. A silent witness. Keys sparkled under the morning light. Emma lifted them again. She said, "Not everyone deserves a Maybach." The cousins laughed louder. One clapped a hand on the table. Porcelain rattled. Bacon grease splattered. The smell was heavy, suffocating. I swallowed, throat dry. My fingers brushed the rough edge of my wallet in my pocket. The envelope inside pressed against me. 2 sticky bills. A reminder. The dog barked outside. Tires crunched gravel. Someone had parked in the driveway. A neighbor passing by slowed down, looking through the glass door. He saw the scene, me standing, family seated, keys raised like trophies. He walked faster. Witness avoided eye contact. The shame was real. Emma leaned closer, perfume flooding the air. Sweet, chemical, suffocating. She whispered low enough for only me. She said, "They see me. Not you." Her words were knives wrapped in sugar. I didn't flinch. The maid cleared another plate. Forks clinked. The fan above hummed, pushing cold air down onto my head. I felt the scar on my arm itch under the sleeve. Old burn from training years ago. Pain never left, just like memory. Only 10 hours left. Robert folded the newspaper again. He said, "We should go to the garage." His tone was not an invitation. It was command. We walked down the hallway. The tiles clicked under polished shoes. My boots dragged faintly, rubber worn thin. The air smelled of polish and oil. Garage door creaked open. Inside, the Maybach gleamed under fluorescent light. Smooth black surface reflected all of them. Not me. Emma lifted the keys higher, light catching the chrome. A cousin muttered, just loud enough. He said, "His name isn't even on the title." Robert paused. Turned. His voice was colder now. He said, "Check again." Silence fell heavy. Everyone stared. Keys trembled in her hand, just for a second. My chest tightened, not from fear. From patience. Social witness stood at the door, the maid again. Her eyes wide, tray pressed to her chest. She saw everything. The look said it all, someone didn't belong. The keys landed on the hood with a dull clink. Emma froze, waiting. And then Robert spoke once more. His tone was final, without warmth. He said, "His name is on the title." The words cut through the air like a verdict. The garage was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent light. Keys sat there, metal against metal, reflecting faces that weren't mine. I didn't move. I just stared at the keys. They thought it was a prize. For me, it was a weapon. The DMV smelled of sweat and old coffee. Papers shuffled, numbers buzzed from the machine, and every chair creaked under restless weight. I held a ticket with fading ink. The texture was damp, as if the paper had soaked up every sigh in the building. 3 days from now they would regret this. The line dragged forward. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting pale reflections on scratched floors. I shifted my stance, boots stiff from years of wear. The scar on my arm itched again, hidden under the sleeve. My hand brushed the inside of my jacket pocket. An old photo rested there. My army unit, 12 men in desert sand. Faces burnt by sun, eyes sharp. A reminder of who I was before all this. The number clicked on the screen. I stepped forward. The clerk didn't look up, glasses sliding down his nose. He tapped the keyboard, each stroke louder than the last. He said, "Name?" I replied, "Mark Turner." The sound of my name echoed in the stale air. He typed, eyes narrowing at the monitor. He said, "Age?" I replied, 39. Numbers didn't lie. They weighed heavier than words. The clerk frowned, tapped again, then paused. He said, "This title doesn't match what they told you." Silence stretched. The hum of the fan above filled the gap. A cough from the waiting area broke it. Someone chuckled, sharp and mocking. A man in the back said, "Even his family lies to him." The laugh spread, low and cruel. Shoes scraped against the floor. My jaw tightened. I didn't respond. The clerk pushed a form forward. Paper rough, edges curled. His finger tapped the line. He said, "Owner Mark Turner. Vehicle Maybach. Clear. The sound of the stamp hit next. Heavy. Final. A red mark spreading across the page like spilled blood. Another laugh came from behind me, louder this time. The social witness was there, a mother with her child. She glanced at me, then at the page. Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. The child tugged her sleeve, whispering, but she pulled him close, avoiding my stare. I folded the paper slowly, the texture scraping against my palm. The old army photos slipped against it. My past pressed into my present. Both burned. Only 12 hours remained. The bank was next. The smells shifted there, polish, perfume, faint ink from fresh bills. The marble floor reflected every light, too clean, too sharp. My boots squeaked once against it, the sound too loud. I felt sweat under my collar, cold and sticky. The teller smiled without warmth. Her nails clicked against the counter as she shuffled papers. She said, "How can I help you, Mr. Turner?" Her voice carried too far. Heads turned. A man in a suit raised an eyebrow. A woman with red lipstick whispered to her friend. Witnesses everywhere. I slid the title across. Smooth surface against polished counter. Her fingers paused, eyes scanning, then widened just slightly. She said, "This is yours. Sole owner." The words echoed. For once, no one laughed. Silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the printer nearby. She stamped the page. The sound was the same as at the DMV. Heavy. Final. The man in the suit smirked. He said, "Guess the family didn't expect that." The lipstick woman chuckled softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Her nails scraped glass. I picked up the paper, folded it once. The texture was smoother here, edges crisp. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. The teller leaned closer, perfume flooding the air. Sweet, overwhelming, clinging to my jacket. She said, "Congratulations, Mr. Turner. Most men don't win battles here." I didn't smile. The clock above the counter ticked. Each second sharper than the last. Only 10 hours left. I walked outside, sunlight burning my eyes. The sound of traffic roared. Tires screeched, horns blared. A bus passed, brakes screaming like metal tearing. The paper in my hand flapped against the wind, edges cutting into my skin. A neighbor from my street stood across the plaza. He saw me, recognized the paper in my hand. His eyes lingered, then he turned away. Social witness again. No words, but silence said more. I stopped at the bench, pulled the old army photo from my jacket. Rough edges, faded colors. Me at 21. Rifle across my lap, helmet crooked. Sandstorms behind us. A different world, but the same eyes. They wanted to erase me with a car, a title, a joke. But my name was still mine. My age was real. My past was proof. Sunday was almost here. I slid the photo back into my wallet, beside the envelope with 2 sticky bills. Past and present pressed together, waiting. The paper crinkled, damp from sweat. The sound of another stamp echoed in my head. Not once. Twice. DMV and bank. Evidence stacking. Every mark against their lies. I stood in the plaza, papers in hand, photo in pocket. Laughter still rang in my ears. But now the stamp was louder. And it carried my name. The hall smelled of wine and roasted meat. Lights reflected on polished silver, bouncing off tall glasses filled too high. Chairs scraped against the marble floor. Every sound carried farther than it should. 3 days from now they would regret this. I stood near the edge of the room. Not seated. Never seated. The draft from the open side door hit my back, cold and constant. My shoes pressed hard against the tile, heels biting. I shifted once. The scar on my arm burned again under the fabric. The family filled the center tables. Emma's laughter rose above the clink of forks. Helen wiped the rim of her glass, eyes sharp, watching the servers more than the guests. Robert stepped back once, checking the clock above the stage. Each gesture was measured, rehearsed. The cameras flashed. I wasn't in the frame. The DMV documents rested in my pocket. Folds crisp, ink still fresh. They pressed against my side like a hidden blade. My proof. My weapon. A waiter passed me, tray heavy with plates. He slowed, eyes flicking to my bare place setting. No fork. No knife. No plate. He hesitated, then moved on. Silent witness. The speeches began. A cousin stood, glass raised. He said, "To Emma. She deserves every gift, every honor." Applause followed. Forks tapped porcelain. Glass rang high. I stood still. Helen said, "Emma shines tonight. She brings us pride." Her pause was long. Eyes slid toward me. Helen said, "And you, just shadows of memory." The draft pushed harder. My throat dried. I reached into my pocket, fingertips brushing the DMV papers. Rough edge bit my skin. The memory of the clerk's stamp still rang in my ears. Only 12 hours remained. The band started. Music filled the hall, too loud, hiding whispers that didn't need hiding. Emma snapped a photo with her phone, light flashing in my eyes. I blinked, vision burning white. She walked past me, perfume heavy, sweet enough to choke. She leaned close. She said, "Not everyone gets to sit here." Her laughter followed, sharp as glass. The cousins smirked, one raising a brow. The waiter returned, this time with wine. He poured for everyone but me. His hand trembled slightly. He noticed. I lifted the DMV papers just enough to feel their weight. My past and present folded together. The ink was truth. Sunday was almost here. I thought back to the desert. Contracts signed at 19. Sand filled my boots, my mouth, my lungs. I returned at 25, carrying scars that never faded. My parents disowned me before deployment, leaving only silence behind. The army became my family, until even that ended. Now here I stood. Not soldier. Not son. Just target. Robert finally stepped forward. His suit was dark, pressed. He held a glass but didn't drink. His eyes cut through noise. His voice was dry as stone. He said, "Stand closer, Mark." The command pulled eyes toward me. Conversations dimmed. Forks froze midair. The draft carried the sound of his order through the hall. I stepped forward. Shoes squeaked once, echo sharp. My palms itched against the DMV papers. The scar burned hotter. Robert held out a pen. Silver, gleaming under the chandeliers. He placed a folded paper on the table. Cameras flashed again, catching the scene. Emma adjusted her bracelet, pretending not to watch. Helen folded her napkin, fingers pressing hard. Robert said, "Sign it. Tonight." The room fell silent. Only the fan above hummed, blades slicing the air. The smell of wine mixed with perfume, heavy and bitter. The DMV papers dug into my pocket. Proof against lies. The pen glinted. The table shook slightly as someone adjusted their chair. My heart didn't race. It slowed. 3 days from now they would regret this. I stared at the pen, silver against paper. They thought it bound me. They didn't see the documents in my pocket, already signed with my name. The air inside the bank smelled of polish and ink. Every breath carried the sting of fresh bills stacked behind glass. The marble floor reflected the lights above, sharp enough to hurt the eyes. Shoes tapped around me, polished leather, quick rhythms. My boots dragged slower, edges worn. 3 days from now they would regret this. I carried the statement in a plain envelope. Paper thin, but weight heavier than steel. The dog tag around my neck pressed against my chest. Old habit returned. My fingers spun it once, then twice, the metal clinking faintly under my shirt. The sound calmed me. Only 12 hours remained. The teller's perfume floated over the counter. Sweet, chemical, filling my throat. She smiled like a photograph, no warmth, just reflection. Her nails clicked against the keyboard, sharp taps like small hammers. She said, "Account name, please?" I replied, "Mark Turner." She typed, screen glowing across her glasses. My name repeated there, line by line. She glanced at the papers I slid forward. Texture rough, ink crisp, edges folded from my pocket. She lifted the bank statement, lips pressing thin. She said, "Balance is secure. Assets remain in your name." The words cut through the silence. I felt the draft from the air vent above, cold against my scalp. Sweat slid down my back, sticky under the shirt. I didn't move. Behind me, voices stirred. A man coughed, then whispered too loud. He said, $2 are more than he deserves." Laughter followed. Not from everyone, but enough. My jaw tightened. The dog tag spun faster in my fingers. Metal against skin. The teller stamped the page. The sound was final, heavy, like a gavel. She slid the papers back. Her eyes flicked once toward the crowd. She noticed. A silent witness. I folded the statement carefully, edges cutting my palm. Paper rustled, faint but sharp. I slipped it into my jacket, against the DMV forms, against the photo. Past and present stacked together. Sunday was almost here. The banquet continued that evening. Wine replaced coffee, and perfume filled the room thicker than smoke. Emma laughed too loudly, snapping a photo with her phone. The click echoed through glass chandeliers. Helen adjusted a vase at her elbow, fingers tapping twice against porcelain. Robert rubbed his palm again, eyes fixed on me. Plates arrived. Roast beef, fried potatoes, glasses of red wine. My place setting stayed empty. No fork, no knife. A draft slid across my chair, colder than before. My shoes pinched, leather cracked. My scar itched raw. A cousin raised his glass. He said, "Emma deserves every dollar. And Mark, well, he counts pennies." Laughter spilled again. Forks clinked. Knives scraped. I stood still. The bank statement pressed against my ribs. Paper against skin. Rustle louder than laughter. I reached for the dog tag, spinning it once more. The sound hidden under their noise, but steady in my ear. A reflex I never lost. Only 10 hours left. Emma leaned across the table, bracelets sliding down her wrist. She spoke louder than needed, voice dripping sugar. She said, "Not everyone can handle real money." Her friends giggled. One snapped a photo, flash catching me half-turned. My face blurred in the corner. Not center. Never center. The waiter noticed again. His eyes lingered on my empty place, then darted away. He knew. He carried witness silently, tray balanced heavy with wine. The smell of roasted meat clung to my jacket. My stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from memory. Field rations in the desert. MREs that tasted like cardboard. Sand in every bite. Now I stood in silk and marble, without a plate. Robert spoke next. His voice low, dry. "Command again," he said. "Closer, Mark. Stand by her." I stepped forward. My shoes squeaked once against the polished floor. Heads turned, whispers floated. Emma lifted her phone again. Snap. Another click. My figure captured without a seat, standing beside her. The draft hit harder. Cold air against sweat. My hand gripped the envelope. Paper rustled under my palm. 3 days from now they would regret this. Helen leaned in, her voice clear, sharp enough for the room. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. And you, just debts." The crowd chuckled. Glasses clinked. The sound of ice shifted in a tumbler. My chest rose, slow, steady. I spun the dog tag again. The banker's stamp echoed in memory. Heavy. Certain. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Sunday was almost here. The envelope bent in my hand, paper rustling like dry leaves. They laughed at pennies. I held the statement. And it carried their future. The night carried the smell of cigarettes and cheap perfume. The banquet had ended, but voices still echoed in the corridors. Chairs scraped against the tiled floor as cleaners stacked them, metal on metal. My head pounded though I hadn't touched wine. I hadn't slept for days. Insomnia pressed heavier than their laughter. 3 days from now they would regret this. The will was on the table. Heavy paper, edges stiff, faint smell of ink. Robert held it like a verdict, his thumb rubbing the corner once. Helen adjusted a vase nearby, hand precise, expression colder than glass. Emma snapped her phone camera. The flash stung my eyes. My chest ached from the draft sliding through a half-open window. Sweat clung to my back, shirt damp, yet my hands were cold. The scar on my arm throbbed, nerves waking under skin. Loneliness pressed harder than pain. Robert said, "Stand here, Mark." His command pulled me closer. My boots dragged, soles rough against marble. No chair for me. No plate. Just empty space. Only 12 hours remained. The lawyer cleared his throat. His tie was crooked, papers stacked in front of him. He tapped the will once, sound dull. His eyes flicked to me, then away, like he'd been warned. He said, "This is straightforward. Assets pass as written." Emma leaned forward, bracelet sliding down her wrist, perfume clouding the air. She smirked at the words, tapping her phone against the table. Click. "Another photo," she said. "Not every man leaves a legacy worth reading." Laughter stirred from the cousins. One leaned back, chair creaking, whispering loud enough for me. He said, $2 were generous." I reached for the dog tag under my shirt, spun it once, then let it fall. My fingers brushed instead against the folded bank statement. Rough paper. Heavy truth. My anchor. The lawyer opened his mouth again, but Helen cut him off. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. She carries our name forward. And Mark, he carries shadows." Her words landed like stones. I stayed silent. My throat was dry, tongue thick. Insomnia had carved hollows beneath my eyes. I hadn't eaten in days, stomach twisted, yet I stood steady. The draft shifted. Curtains swayed. The smell of fried meat from the kitchen clung to the hall, sour now, mixing with cold coffee left in cups. My boots pinched harder. Sweat trickled. Sunday was almost here. A waiter paused at the doorway. He held a tray half-emptied, his eyes flicking between the papers and my empty space at the table. He noticed. Witness again. His steps faltered before he disappeared down the hall. Robert placed the will flat. His finger tapped twice. Robert said, "Sign it, and end this." The lawyer nodded quickly, pen sliding across the table. Emma snapped another photo. Helen folded her napkin tight, fingers white. I didn't reach. The scar on my arm burned. My chest tightened. Memories of sand returned, contracts signed, orders followed, comrades buried. Loneliness was nothing new. Isolation was a familiar uniform. Only 10 hours left. Emma leaned close, her voice low but sharp. She said, "Everyone's watching. You'll still walk away with nothing." I turned my head, just enough. I replied, "Not nothing." The room stilled for a second. Chairs creaked as cousins shifted. Fork clinked against an abandoned plate. The fan above hummed, pushing cold air down. The lawyer's hand trembled slightly on the pen. His eyes darted from Robert to me. Silence stretched. The will lay there, ink black against white. Paper thick, corner curled slightly. Helen's gaze fixed on it, unblinking. She moved once, wiping the rim of her glass. Helen said, "He wasn't supposed to know." The words sliced cleaner than any blade. The draft hit harder, carrying her voice through the hall. My chest rose slow, steady. The scar burned hotter, but I didn't move. 3 days from now they would regret this. The will stayed unsigned. Silence hung heavy. Helen's line lingered. "He wasn't supposed to know." It told me everything. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and dust. Sunlight cut through tall windows, lines of gold crossing the floor. Papers shuffled on the clerk's desk. A clock ticked above the bench. Every second sounded heavier than the last. 3 days from now they would regret this. I stood at the front table. My hands rested flat on the surface. The grain of the wood was rough, uneven, scratching my palms. My shoes pinched. The draft from the vent above dropped cold air onto my shoulders. Sweat clung to my back, damp under the jacket. Only 12 hours remained. Emma sat across from me. Perfume drifted each time she moved. She adjusted her mirror, then snapped a photo with her phone. The click rang through silence. Helen folded her napkin at the side, sharp creases, eyes fixed forward. Robert stepped back once, checking his watch, lips tight. The clerk rose. His voice carried. He said, "State your full name for the record." I replied, "Mark Anthony Turner. Age 39. Former U.S. Army Sergeant." The words filled the room. Silence followed. Pens paused. Papers stopped. Even Emma lowered her phone. Sunday was almost here. The judge leaned forward. His robe smelled faintly of dust and paper. He tapped a pen against the bench, each strike deliberate. He said, "The matter before us concerns inheritance, property, and contested assets." The lawyer for my family shifted, clearing his throat. His tie was tight, collar damp with sweat. He lifted the will, pages stiff. The sound of paper echoed like thunder. Emma smiled, eyes sharp. She whispered to Helen. She said, "Not everyone deserves the Maybach." Helen smirked, wiping the rim of her glass with one finger. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. And he brings nothing." I spun the dog tag once under my shirt, then let it drop. My fingers brushed instead against the pen on the table. Smooth, cold, waiting. The symbol of their demand. The weapon of mine. The bailiff shifted near the door, boots clicking. He noticed me standing without a chair. Empty place behind me. Another silent witness. The lawyer pressed forward, voice rising. He said, "Your Honor, the estate belongs to Emma and her parents. The defendant received gifts already. $2 were more than generous." Laughter stirred from the gallery. A cough, then a chuckle, spreading like fire. My jaw tightened. My throat burned dry. But I stayed silent. The judge raised a hand. Silence returned. His eyes fell on me. He said, "Do you have documents?" I slid the folder across. DMV title. Bank statement. Thick pages, ink black, stamps heavy. The judge lifted them, eyes narrowing. His pen tapped once, twice. The sound was louder than laughter. He said, "Ownership is clear. Mark Anthony Turner holds legal rights." The room shifted. Chairs creaked, gasps spread. Emma snapped her phone again, click sharp, but her hand trembled. Helen wiped her glass harder, claws squealing. Robert rubbed his palm, stepping back once more. The draft hit colder. Sweat turned to chill. My scar itched raw, pulsing under cloth. My chest rose slow, steady. Sunday was here. The lawyer stammered, flipping pages. His words lost weight. His hands shook. He looked toward Helen, then Robert, then Emma. No answer came. The judge lowered the papers. His voice was final. He said, "The property, vehicles, and accounts remain under Mark Anthony Turner." The silence was absolute. No laughter. No whispers. Cameras clicked from the press row, flashes burning white. I stood still. The clerk slid the final document forward. A pen lay on top. Silver, polished, gleaming under the lights. My fingers touched it. Cold metal against warm skin. I pressed it to the page. Ink spread dark across white. My signature cut through their lies. 3 days from now they would regret this. Now they already did. Subscribe if you want more stories about real men who don't scream. They act. Coldly? To the end?